Hello and welcome to episode 60 Property Mastermind podcast with Hilary Saxton. This week I have with me the amazing Bob Anderson, as usual. But today we are talking, where do you go for property advice? We are going to be covering a range of property advice topics, and we do believe this is one that you must listen to. So let's jump into episode 60, where do you go for property advice? Hey, and welcome to episode 60, Where Do You Go for Property Advice, Property Mastermind podcast with Hilary Saxton. First of all, giving away a copy of Property Millionaires Exposed, as we do most weeks. This week going to Rocco Duccio. I spoke to Rocco just as he jumped on a plane the other night. So Rocco, this book is in the post to you, and I very much hope you get a lot out of it. Sounds to me like you will. There are a lot of different property strategies in here, written by people who might have an idea on what they're talking about, which leads us to our topic. Where do you go for property advice? And I'm going to qualify Bob here. After 38 years in the industry, as a developer, working with people, educating probably Australia's longest standing educator as well, and educated most of the other educators, Bob actually knows what he's talking about. So let's grab his opinion and mine on a few other topics, and let's say the word opinion because that will come into this, and get started. So Bob, where do you want to kick this off? We've had a brief chat. We have a brief chat on where we'd like to go.
You know how I often start these things is go to the other side. So I mean, the topic is, where do you go for good advice? I'd like to start off as, maybe where you don't go for good advice and maybe why you don't go there, because, maybe narrow the field down.
When we're talking about advice today, what advice are we talking about?
Well,
here we go.
We're talking about...
Strap yourself in, folks.
Look, we're talking about advice, but one of the key skills is to separate opinion from advice. And so we're talking about property-related matters, obviously. But, just generally speaking, it's the age of knowledge and technology, isn't it? I mean, you can just about find out everything. And we often do it. I could be out with a couple of mates and we're talking about something, and we might be talking about, some particular sporting event.
Fishhawks probably know you.
It could be anything. And we say, who was that person that played in that position, or what was the score from that game? And now bingo, you can just jump straight on. In a matter of moments, going back to a footy game 30 years ago, we can see who scored the points, what the final score was. But years ago we'd have to go to reference books or go to libraries. So it is the age of information. And that's great. But the downside of it is that so much information out there can be... Well, it can be downright false, but it can also be slanted. And you need to be discerning. Because
there is a difference between correct information and opinion.
Absolutely.
And that's saying. Opinions are like, thingamies. Everyone's got one.
Yeah. I mean, you use the word advice in the title of today's topic. And we have, as I said, we've got to be very careful how we separate advice from opinion.
Yes.
I did look up a bit of a... current sort of definition. This is what I found up. I'm just going to read it, so that's what I'm looking at. Opinion, a view or judgment formed about something, this is important, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. It's an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. And it's not just like black and white. You can have degrees of opinion. So you can have a topic and you could have somebody who's like, let's say, absolutely in favour, somebody who's absolutely against. But then you can have intermediate opinions in certain circumstances, this and that. So the world's full of opinions. Everybody has an opinion about, where interest rates are going to finish. What's inflation going to be in a year? Is property, going to dip more, or is it going to start? Everyone's got an opinion on property. Everyone's got an opinion on everything. And that's what it is. It's not necessarily based on fact or knowledge.
And that's why we said, where should you go for that advice? Because standing in a barbecue with your mate who listens to the news and is giving his opinion or her opinion on interest rates, property, where to buy, where not to buy, what to do right now, where to invest, where not to invest, unfortunately, those people impact our decisions, and so much of the time they've got no idea.
No, but they have opinions.
Yes,
advice, let me qualify advice. It's guidance offered with regard to prudent future actions. So guidance offered with regard to prudent future action. That's advice. And advice needs to come from somebody who you might say is an expert in that field, who's had a lot of practical experience. So, that's where the issue is. And so many people hear something from somebody who's by no means an expert. They take that on board. And you were talking about your mum the other day.
Oh, shocker.
So
my mum takes. I was talking to her a while ago. I think I have alluded to this on this podcast. Crack up. She, she's a retired farmer's wife and she's got money to invest. And she talks about it with her friends at St. Vincent de Paul that all volunteer there, and they talk about what they're going to do. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I'd be taking my advice from Myrtle.
I can just imagine all these nanas at St. Vinny's folding up clothes, and putting them out there, and all having a bit of a chat about the economics and where you're investing money and where's a good place.
Frightening stuff.
Yeah. They should be talking about farming. At least they came off a farm most of those.
Yeah, well, I think they mostly all did. I suppose I mean completely aside from property, one of my topics, and I started writing this week's email about it, but I don't know, I might change it yet. Was about, I'm a nutritionist. I've lost 40 kilos, but not just that, I've kept it off for many years, and that's the trick to weight loss, understanding food, understanding how to look after your body, especially the ageing bodies, you out there listening, knowing we always age and it changes all the way through. But what I find, I used to get my nails, this is one classic example, get my nails done back in New Zealand, and this lady, she was always a bit larger, she was doing them, she started losing weight, and then she started lecturing me on this was the only way to do it and her way was the best way, and I have to bite my tongue because I sat there thinking,
stick to your nails, lady.
Oh my gosh, I'll give you 3 months and you'll be back where you were. I'd probably thought within a year, and it was probably about 3 months. But when somebody achieves something once, it doesn't mean that they are an expert because, and let's bring this back to property, as you say, in the last 3 to 5 years, if you've managed not to pass away, you have made money through property.
Oh, well, even 2021, as I say, it created so many millionaires, not through anything clever on their part. All they had to do is not die and not to fall on their lane. And that's good. We need luck in our life.
Oh, absolutely, that's luck, but it does not make them an expert. It doesn't
make them an expert on property.
Makes them an expert in that particular year.
But they could, they could put something out there. How I made more than $1 million in the last 12 months.
Oh my God, we see it all the time and laugh.
And it could be something that they owned a house for $2 million. Did absolutely nothing, it became $3 million. It's near a beach somewhere, Central Coast, who knows? And yes, they did make $1 million in the last 12 months, but...
Everybody did, or many people did, yeah.
Had absolutely nothing to do with skill. And so that's why you have to be a bit careful where you get your advice from. I often say that these days, particularly with social media, it's the age of the 5-minute expert.
Yes.
In the old days, here we go. Bob's reminiscing about the old days.
Get on that soapbox, Bob, and have a go.
Back in my time, Hillary.
Yes.
No, well, in like, say, internet was like 1995 or something. I think
cell phones are 12 years old, are they? Is it 12 years?
Oh, they're more than that. I had one of the very first cell phones back in the mid-'80s, but it was a brick and a half, that thing. But if you think of the internet, I think the internet was around mid-'90s. And social media, things like Facebook, a lot of us think, particularly younger people, it's been there their whole life, but it hasn't been. A lot of these things sort of happened around 2008, 9, 10, those sorts of things when they happened. But in the old days, when I was a young whippersnapper, you basically had to earn your stripes, a bit like being in the Navy. You had to work your way up. You had to experience things and do things and make mistakes and learn from your mistakes, and eventually you got somewhere, and then you were sort of given credit for having gotten somewhere. Whereas these days, and it's good and bad. We use social media all the time, so I'm not knocking social media. I say, but you have to be careful of what you see and read on social media. And social media is a great tool. It's good for marketing. As I said, we're happy to use it. Of course, we've met lots of wonderful people through marketing on social media, but we got a lot of substance behind us as well. The age of influencers.
Oh my goodness, influencers.
ERS.
I don't know if they're really listening, but we just explain that I'm speechless, which does not happen. I just think it's so ridiculous that somebody is paid, somebody who's done one thing well. Like I think
becoming famous.
Yes,
famous.
what about the reality TV
famous.
ones, Bob?
Oh, well,
like they've gone on, so let's say Married at First Sight, acted like a complete twat, and now they become an influencer and can give advice on
relationships or something.
Yeah, or makeup or anything. They're paid to
anything. And,
oh my gosh!
Well, recently we've seen asset come down on influencers for giving financial advice. And often they were paid to. They get out there, they've got, millions and millions of followers, and they say, look, this is a great investment. Everyone, you need to get into this. Could be a shocker. I mean, they just paid. They wouldn't even understand what the investment was or, what they were promoting. They were just paid. Remember that time we did that? We actually approached through our full-time marketer.
Who shall remain nameless.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about Georgia. We won't mention her. But we got her to contact somebody that went through on the block. And they became a bit of an influencer, and we were looking. It's more sort of checking it out if they were looking at doing some promotional work, and
because they did have some property stuff going on.
They had a little bit of stuff on, but
no idea.
No, not really. No.
Bless them.
And it's basically an auction, where they're selling their soul to the highest bidder. Yeah. And that was funny. I mean,
we didn't go down there because within a couple of weeks, remember they did something terrible and they ended up making the newspaper. Yeah, there's a way to make
the wrong things.
There's a way to make your brand go bad
in a hurry. Yeah. So you've got to be very, very careful.
But even let's take that back a step, and I'm going to go to what people post on social media. The postings, you don't see a bad photo of me on social media, or if you do, I must be looking worse than I think, because we all are careful about what we post. But let's take that to what we perceive to be who we are, because very often we get phone calls, and we allude to this often, of people who trust somebody from social media and what they post, so they'll go and invest money with their property development project, and they're not hearing from them, they're not being paid the return, it's just gone down a hole.
In some cases, years go on.
Yeah, in some cases, years go on. And this is twice this week. So this isn't something that happens sometimes, but they'll come to us and say, what do I do? But that is because of social media can really portray somebody as somebody they're not.
Absolutely. And it's just right with it.
Fake book, we call it.
Well, I was going to say everything's fake out there. It's not. But I mean, reality TV is fake. I mean, we know quite a few people that are on the other side, producers, videographers, and all that do it. They're script written. They're hand-picked people. There was one thing I remember where they had to do 8 reshoots on Married at First Sight because the producer wasn't happy with some
with sort the spontaneous response.
With conflict, and conflict. That's all ridiculous. I won't go there.
Yeah.
But social media and Facebook, and. Look, what you see out there is what people want you to see.
Yes.
And
that's the same as us. We want you to see us as professional people. Yeah,
But that's what I'm saying. It's good and bad. Social media is a great way of getting your message out there, and if you've got a good message, if you're solid, you're real, you're fair income, and you want to help people or whatever it is you want to do, you want to sell a product, it's a good product. It's great. And as I said before, I'm not knocking it. It's just that. It's a bit like a knife, you could use a knife to, spread some butter on your bread, and that's good. Or, knives are used to kill people. It's still a knife, What do you do with it? Well, it's the same thing. This is a social media platform where people get out there, they post, they put stuff out there. Some of the information is totally wrong. It can be deceptive. It could be people pretending that who they are, who they're not. Or it could be something great. It could be a great way of, meeting people, getting your message out there, changing lives. You've got a great product, get it out there.
So we've talked about people and their opinions, and then we've talked about professionals, and we've talked about Googling stuff, like Googling the answer, which is basically when you Google something, you're basically reading somebody's blog that they wrote. So if I write a blog on how to fix your car, do not read it. It is just...
No.
It's not even real. No. So those are the 3 we've covered so far. Let's go to, what about professionals, Bob, that cross the line on their advice? Because we have this all the time. And I'll give a classic example of that, because we work one-on-one with people, with some people. So sometimes people will put across an option. So they'll approach someone, they want an option, some sort of way of of creating a property deal, and it's a great deal. It is a great deal for the homeowner who doesn't know how to do it. They will receive a great return. It's a great deal for the newbie developer. It's a really good deal, but these people go to their lawyer. The people who own the property go to their lawyer, and the lawyer will just put a spanner in the works because he's going to give advice, which he doesn't actually know.
He shouldn't be giving
advice on property development.
On certain matters that they often do.
Yeah.
They step outside of their area of expertise.
And it's frustrating when you see somebody who, it was such, well, I was just thinking of a recent one, such a win-win for both parties, and a lawyer who's maybe a bit stuck in the mud or had a bad experience, or whose cousin's, auntie's, mother's dog.
I know the deal you're talking about, because that particular person who had a property that was very good for development, one of our people was talking to them. They had an old family, the person was quite old themselves who owned the site. They had an old family lawyer who'd helped the family for years, probably like 70 years old, went there for specific advice, and you're not going to get it.
No, that's not...
In that particular case.
So that's one aspect of professionals.
What that person should have advised on, I don't think he even understood it, of, what is an option, how do they work? He should have advised his client on that, instead of which he's given the client a so-called advice on what property is worth, and how all this sort of stuff totally outside of their area of expertise.
But what we think as well is because they don't understand it, they just shy away, or they may have had a bad experience personally, nothing to do with an option, or who knows.
Oh, and accountants are the same.
Oh, don't start on accountants. I thought we weren't going to bring them up.
Oh no, I'll bring accountants up any day, because I've got I do business with some excellent accountants. And accountants are great for what they do, but don't let them step outside of what they do. What do they do? Somebody studies accountancy, they get a degree in accountancy, they might go and work for a larger firm of accountants. They might eventually set up their own business or not, doesn't matter.
I've got two. I've got a brother and a son.
Yeah. What are they trained in? Well,
tax.
Predominantly tax, yeah. I mean, obviously, look, some of them step into business advice. But really, the advice should be related to the numbers around the business. Projections, perhaps, but definitely the taxation side. The problem is that accountants step into other fields. They'll start commenting on... I've had accountants representing other people who've come back and wanted to talk about a feasibility. Now, feasibility is a spreadsheet full of numbers, and accountants love spreadsheets full of numbers. But they wouldn't have a clue what the items or the dollar value of things should be in a feasibility. Only a developer or project manager would understand any of that. But wanting to argue the toss on, they usually just cut their legs off, because you're just going to waste your time. Throw them in the bin, move on.
But actually, we've had that even recently, Bob, because we're capital raising for the retirement village. Great investment, first mortgage security. You're offering higher than average returns on first mortgage, and probably 20% of people, well, we've had 1,000 tyre kickers, obviously, which we do. Thank you, bless you if you're listening. Love your work. Thanks.
Tyre kickers.
Thank you for wasting my time. But we do get lots of genuine, lovely people, which is great. And what is interesting is that some people say, I'll talk to my accountant, and they come back, my accountant said I shouldn't. And we're like, oh my gosh, what does your accountant even know about that sort of thing?
Exactly, yeah. So they can advise on, tax. Look, what are the areas of expertise, really? I mean, it's taxation in terms of, the different taxes, right? GST, income tax, capital gains tax. They understand that. They understand a bit about a few of the other sort of non-taxes, maybe stamp duty. They understand land tax. So that's really what they understand. Some of the smarter ones around, that are more business orientated, they understand structure. But structure is really about tax. Because at the end of the day, when you set up a structure to do an enterprise, and it could be a property development or anything else, the two primary things are taxation, so you want to minimise your tax, and you want to protect your assets. The two primary reasons are asset protection and tax minimisation, not avoidance. And so that's what they're experts at, really, Like if you're buying a carpet cleaning business, they can tell you all about the taxation, the income side of all of that, but they can't tell you anything about carpets, for instance. Or in this case, property development. And so, yeah, sure, ask your accountant, and perhaps that accountant's partly looking after somebody's self-managed super fund. So you can say, well, look, can I use my self-managed super fund to do this particular thing? The accountant may or may not know. They might have to go to the trustee of the self-managed super fund, but whatever it is, can I do it? Not is it a good investment, but can I do it? But then, accountants start stepping out. Lawyers do it, accountants do it. And what happens is this. They're not an expert on a particular subject. It could be even something as simple as a property investment. They can tell you, what all your tax deductions are and all that sort of stuff. But they shouldn't advise on whether it's a good suburb to invest in or even necessarily what's the property market doing. That's even talking about inflation and interest rates, that's getting out of their area of expertise. That's not what they do. And even in the area where economists go, which is often that stuff, 20 economists, you get 20 opinions.
I love it when people say, because I'm an economist, so...
Everybody's technically an economist. You can be an economist without a degree. You just call yourself an economist because you're commenting on the economy.
I might do that from now on.
Well, I know people that do that. They don't have a degree in economics, yet they put themselves out there as economists. Got to be very careful. But what happens is that an accountant might be asked for advice in an area where he steps outside of his realm. So what's he going to do? He's not going to say, oh, look, I don't know. The really good ones would say, that's not my area of expertise. I can help you with, any tax-related matters, structure-related matters, but you need to talk to da-da-da-da-da about that. But they won't, because they feel, particularly the more insecure ones, which is a majority, think, well, I don't want to let on that I don't know everything, pretty much. So they'll have an opinion. And what they'll do, they'll put that opinion out as advice. And rather than even give positive advice, they'll go straight to don't do it. Why? Well, if anything ever happened in the future and something didn't go well, they don't want to be the person who said, oh, you should do it. So rather than say, look, I don't know, you need to get advice from a particular expert on that, they'll say, no, don't do it. Why? Well, you can't get into trouble from somebody if they don't do something. And we see it in property development. What about structural engineers? Over engineering projects. That's similar in a way. I'm stepping outside of the opinion advice thing, but I'm talking about people who do things to other people's detriment, simply so they never get any trouble. I'm thinking of what I've had structural engineers design foundations for a 3-storey building that could hold a 10 or 12-storey building up. Now, they will never, ever get into trouble. Nothing will collapse or crack or anything because it's designed for a 10 or 12-storey building and it's a 3-storey building.
That just escalates costs.
Enormously. And it can really impact on profitability and ultimately finance. And I've had that happen a couple of times where I've stepped out and used somebody else.
It reminded me of when you said, I'd like a watch to see how many steps I do. And I bought you a Garmin.
Bought me a $1,500 watch. Well, it does everything.
But do you know how many steps you do? Do you even check it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but it does like 1,000 other things off the subject.
Sorry, I was just like,
So what I've had to do is actually go back to the structure. I said, look, you've designed something. I've spoken to the builder for a 12-storey building and they said, well, I'm not changing it. And so they're overprotecting themselves. That's what I'm saying. I've had to sack them and go and engage another structural engineer on a couple of occasions.
That's ridiculous, isn't it?
So these are people who, for purely reasons of protection, never ever wanting to, get into any sort of strife, they just say no. Just say no straight away.
So that's the people giving advice that shouldn't
outside
be.
of their area.
Yeah. There is also something which is when we Google something or when we hear something, and it's called confirmation bias, the confirmation bias effect.
Yeah.
And I always refer to it as this: we see what we believe to be true. So two people can look at, you could see, a classic is maybe you see two men yelling at each other, or it looks like they're yelling at each other, and you think, they're having a fight, and you go home and you say to your partner, I saw these two men having a horrific fight on the side of the road. Somebody else sees a deaf man and another guy trying to communicate. What we do is we see what we believe to be true. So if we believe that all property developers are after ripping people off, or if we believe that all real estate agents are dodgy, if we believe that all accountants know the absolute truth about money, if we believe whatever we believe to be true, and right now in your mind, even if you disagree with us slightly, you'll be looking for ways to confirm that in your head, so that we always look at, our brain will look for every way to make us right. So in a room full of, it's probably like standing in a room, if I say shut your eyes, and it's, even do it right now, not if you're driving. And then I want you to think the colour red, and then open your eyes and see how much red you see. It's once we point something out, we've made a decision that it's our truth. I mean, that's an exercise done well. It can be done better, but we end up seeing that same thing and confirming that it's correct, and it's not.
And it could be totally incorrect.
It can be totally incorrect.
I read recently something similar to that, where they talked about, flat Earth. Some people staunchly believe, and they go on a lie detector and probably pass it, they staunchly believe that the Earth is flat. Now, if you believe that, and you went on the internet and you went searching, is the Earth flat? And you would come to sites of other similar people who think the Earth's flat, and there'd be, flat Earth societies, and there'd be all sorts of groups who think the Earth is flat, and they'll have all these reasons why they think the Earth is flat. And so that person who does believe the Earth is flat goes on there, would be drawn to those sorts of things. If one popped up, here is proof, absolute proof that the Earth is not flat, then they'd probably skip that one and go on. And so it's that, you're drawn to what, like you just said, what you believe to be true.
You'll see what you believe to be true.
Yeah. So, what have we covered? Well, advice and opinion. Be very discerning how you separate those. Be very discerning on things like social media, on what's there, and
on professionals. How professional are they?
Yeah.
And while we're on it, let's talk about educators. The ones that, we talk about this often as well, but why not?
Well, why not?
We even saw someone Bob was referring to as a spruiker about a year ago, calling other people spruikers. Well, there you go. Someone's moved up in the world.
Yeah, now they moved up to being a spruiker. What is a spruiker, mate? Is a spruiker good or a bad thing? But anyway, it's got a negative connotation.
It does. But just be careful where you get, just because it's cheaper or somebody has a good marketing team or somebody has a louder voice doesn't make it better.
No, somebody's done a few developments and they've worked out. I mean, anything post-GFC, it's pretty hard to lose money. My dog could have done it too. In fact, I think my dog did do a couple of developments and did quite well thanks to the market. Longevity, diversity, location, all that sort of stuff. It all comes into education. And at the end of the day, experience, not theory. Practical. That's what we do arrange. We still develop strongly ourselves. We're involved in a number of developments and we do it and we teach it.
Both dealing with the stuff that everyone else is dealing with.
Yeah,
construction costs,
interest rates. Yeah, we deal with all that.
Both dealing with those.
Not for the first time.
No.
I've developed an interest rate sort of 23%. I've seen inflation at 11.4%. I've seen unemployment, double digits developed through all that. So, it's just going through another phase.
It's working through that phase properly and taking the advice from people who know what they're doing, not people that have just a strong opinion or people who are stepping outside of their line because their ego's big potentially or they don't want to get themselves in trouble.
Yeah, if you weren't developing 30 years ago, you wouldn't have had the experience of developing through times when, money was expensive and, unemployment's sort of 11 or 12% and inflation's through the roof, 12% plus, Okay,
Bob, I think we've given it a good go. I think we've given enough information that people might consider or just think about where they are getting their advice from. Be careful of who they listen to.
Yeah.
If I'm giving you advice
everything you see
on cars or anything like that, don't trust me. I have no idea. Mine's blue. That's all I know.
Yeah. So. I think the whole thing's about being discerning.
Yes.
And getting second and third opinions on things as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That is episode 60. It's a wrap. I've enjoyed your opinion on all of that.
I gave no advice today whatsoever.
You gave no advice. Well done, you. Okay, thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next week. Bye.
See you.